The summer heat shimmered off the blacktop as I was unloading lumber from the back of my truck, working quietly on repairs to the old porch, when I heard the unmistakable sound of Karen's voice cutting across the still air. Loud, shrill, commanding. It carried the same venom she had been hurling at us since we moved in 6 months earlier. "You think you can just live here without following our rules?" she screamed from across the cul-de-sac, her finger jabbing like a spear toward my wife, Jenna, who had just come out to bring me a glass of iced tea. Jenna didn't flinch. Her calm always unsettled Karen more than anger ever could, but my gut clenched. I knew where this was going. Karen strutted down the street with her clipboard and HOA handbook clutched in one hand like sacred scripture, her phone pressed to her ear with the other. She was calling 911, loudly enough for everyone within 5 houses to hear. "Yes, officer. I need immediate assistance. We've got a dangerous situation, an unregistered property owner refusing to comply with our neighborhood codes. This woman is hostile, refuses to recognize HOA authority. We need her removed immediately." The words rang out like a siren of absurdity. But Karen wasn't joking. She was so intoxicated by her imaginary power that she believed the police existed to enforce her rules. Jenna set the glass of tea on the railing and stepped down the porch stairs, meeting Karen halfway. "Ma'am, I've told you before," Jenna said evenly. "Our property is not part of your HOA. It never has been. You have no jurisdiction here." Her voice was steady, almost gentle, but it was the kind of calm that could snap steel. Karen barked back. "Don't you dare talk to me about jurisdiction. Every house on this block is under my authority. You will sign the HOA charter or face legal consequences. I'll have you arrested today if that's what it takes." Her words sent a ripple of tension through the handful of neighbors who had stepped outside, curious about the commotion. Most of them had suffered under her reign of fines and threats, but none had dared challenge her directly. The wail of sirens grew louder, and Karen's face broke into a grin of triumph. 2 patrol cars rolled up, lights flashing, and 4 officers stepped out. Karen practically sprinted toward them, shrieking over her shoulder, "You'll see. You're going to jail for refusing to comply." She launched into her rant, waving her handbook in the air, pointing toward Jenna as though she were pointing at a criminal mastermind. The officers listened politely for about 10 seconds. Then one of them held up his hand to silence her. His gaze shifted to Jenna. And that was when everything changed. Because Jenna didn't just stand there as my wife. She stood there as a decorated officer in the United States Navy, still serving in a reserve capacity. A woman who had led security details in ports most people couldn't pronounce. And the officers recognized her instantly. The senior deputy's eyes widened, then softened with respect. And in unison, the 3 others straightened their posture. One by one, they raised their hands not to cuff her, but to salute. The crowd gasped. Karen froze, mouth wide open, color draining from her face as the very officers she had summoned turned their respect not to her authority, but to the woman she had tried to humiliate. Jenna returned their salute with quiet dignity, then lowered her hand and spoke with a calmness that carried like thunder. "Gentlemen, thank you. As I told this woman before, this property is privately owned, outside the HOA jurisdiction. She has been harassing us for months, and today she's filed a false police report. I would like that noted." Her words were precise, clipped, the tone of someone who had been in command before and knew how to wield truth like a weapon. The deputy nodded, pulling a small notepad from his pocket, already writing down the details. Karen sputtered, rushing forward, insisting, "No, no, She's lying. She has to obey the HOA. Nobody is above the rules. Her voice cracked into desperation, her authority crumbling before the neighbor's eyes. And then the twist nobody expected arrived. From the far end of the street, an older man in plain clothes walked briskly toward the scene. At first, I thought he was just another neighbor. But the moment he pulled out a leather badge case, everyone straightened. He introduced himself as Agent Morales from the state attorney's office. As it turned out, Karen's antics had already been reported multiple times: fraudulent fines, threats, false claims of jurisdiction. The attorney's office had been investigating her for weeks. And today, her 911 stunt provided exactly the evidence they needed. The neighbors gasped as Morales stepped right up to her and said, "Ma'am, you've just committed a prosecutable offense by making a false emergency report. You've abused your position and wasted county resources. You are officially under investigation." Karen's shriek cracked into a whimper. She tried to talk her way out of it, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just protecting the community. But nobody was listening anymore. Her empire of fear was dissolving in the heat of truth. And the people who once cowered under her threats now stood taller, watching as her bluster collapsed into shame. I held Jenna's hand as we both stood there, letting the weight of the moment wash over us. The day Karen had chosen as her triumph had turned into the day of her greatest humiliation. And it had all unfolded in the full light of the community she had terrorized for too long. The street had gone so quiet you could hear the breeze rustling the flags on the porches. Karen, who once roared like a tyrant, now looked small, cornered, her chest heaving as she darted wild eyes from neighbor to neighbor in search of support. But none came. Even the few loyalists who once echoed her threats now backed away, muttering excuses, unwilling to go down with her sinking ship. For the first time, she stood truly alone. Agent Morales didn't waste words. He pulled a tablet from his satchel and began logging her statements on record, replaying her own frantic 911 call where she had claimed Jenna was a dangerous criminal refusing HOA authority. Hearing her own voice echoed back through the device made her flinch. He looked at her steadily and said, "This isn't just harassment. This is fraud, abuse of power, and a clear pattern of misconduct. You will be answering for this in court." Karen's knees seemed to buckle, but her pride kept her upright. She tried to pivot, to cry instead of shout, to claim she had only meant well. "I was trying to protect the neighborhood. You don't understand. She doesn't follow the rules. None of them do. And someone has to take charge." That was when Jenna stepped forward, her presence steady as a mountain. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look angry. Instead, she spoke with the authority of someone who had carried lives in her hands. "The only rules that matter are the ones rooted in law and respect, not fear and lies. You've used your position to terrorize people who just wanted peace. That ends today." The words landed heavier than any gavel, and a murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. Neighbors who had once kept their blinds drawn now stepped closer, nodding, clapping softly, emboldened by the courage they had just witnessed. The senior deputy, still standing with his notepad, finally addressed the crowd. "Folks, this property has been verified as outside of HOA jurisdiction. Anyone who has been threatened or fined under false pretenses should contact our office. We'll be coordinating with the state to sort out restitution." That statement sparked gasps, then cheers. It was as if the invisible chains Karen had wrapped around the neighborhood had just snapped apart. People began speaking at once: stories of bogus fines, threats over paint colors, bullying letters slipped into mailboxes. And with every word, Karen shrank further into herself. Her empire of intimidation turned into a public record of shame. Her last desperate act came with tears streaking through the dust on her cheeks. She fell to her knees on the hot asphalt and begged the deputies not to take her in, promising she'd resign, promising she'd never bother anyone again. But the damage was already done. Morales closed his tablet, nodded to the deputies, and said, "She's free to go home for now, but she'll be receiving formal charges. This investigation is moving forward." The deputies helped her to her feet, but there was no dignity in the gesture. She stumbled back to her SUV, and the moment she turned the ignition, the crowd erupted not with jeers, but with a long, cathartic applause. They weren't clapping for her. They were clapping for freedom. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. The HOA board dissolved after the rest of its members resigned under pressure, unwilling to face the same scrutiny. County officials began drafting reforms that limited the power of HOAs to fabricate authority beyond their legal boundaries. And within our street, something even more powerful happened. Neighbors who had once been strangers to each other came together. Barbecues sprang up. Kids played on front lawns. And people finally smiled without glancing over their shoulders for Karen's clipboard. One evening, not long after the dust had settled, the deputies returned in plain clothes. They brought a framed certificate addressed to Jenna, thanking her for her service and for reminding them that honor, respect, and courage were more powerful than fear. They saluted her again on our porch, and I swear I've never felt prouder in my life. Karen, meanwhile, faded into whispers. Her name became shorthand for arrogance and abuse. Her story told as a warning to every HOA president who thought power was theirs to abuse. She fought her charges in court, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. The fines bankrupted her. The disgrace isolated her. And the very people she once ruled with terror avoided her like a storm cloud. In the end, she had built her entire life on control. And when that control crumbled, she had nothing left. I stood with Jenna one evening at the edge of our property, the sun setting in fiery colors across the horizon. We watched children laughing near the cul-de-sac, their parents relaxed and happy for the first time in years. Jenna squeezed my hand and whispered, "Funny how she thought she could break us. And instead she gave us back our community." She was right. Out of the ashes of Karen's downfall, something stronger had risen. A neighborhood no longer bound by fear, but by mutual respect. And now I turn to you. You've seen how it happened. How arrogance clashed with truth. How fear crumbled before dignity. Do you think Karen got what she deserved? Was justice served in the right way? Share your thoughts. Because every voice matters when it comes to standing up to abuse and defending what's right.